bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons here with the Hockey Writers as well. Colton Pankyw's on the other line there. Colton, how you doing, buddy?
Not too bad, Jim. I thought we'd kind of pass these winter months here, so just trying to get through that. Nice and cold in my place tonight, but other than that, not too bad.
Yeah, I haven't. Are you in Calgary?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were talking. I laughed because I was watching before we got on here as we're recording this. Arizona's playing the Calgary Flames, and the guys on the Calgary Flames broadcast said it's a little chilly in Tempe, Arizona right now. And then the other guys like, you might not want to say anything about the because in Calgary it's like really cold. It's not very warm here either in Edmonton. Like I haven't been outside really today, but it is getting colder. So hopefully we don't have this for too much longer.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're going to be talking a few different things here on the show today. We're going to be talking about the Oilers win over the Philadelphia Flyers. In fact, the Oilers, although we've kind of been talking about how they haven't been able to hold leads and they've not necessarily played all that well, they've got points in like 15 of the last 16 games. So they're staying right afloat there in the Pacific Division, potentially, could be within a couple wins of the lead in the division. They got a big win over Philadelphia. It was kind of a dirty win. They didn't play wonderful the whole time. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we'll talk about some of the trade rumors that are the players linked to the Oilers. Let's start with the Flyers game. What did you make of that win? What was it, 4-2? Good win for the Oilers over the Flyers there.
Yeah, obviously a very important one. Kind of they've been sliding a bit lately with all those overtime losses and everything. That said, I still didn't love the win, just again kind of the fact that they don't seem to be able to win games where they're holding the lead. They're always kind of the comeback team. We've seen that again, trailing going into the third there, but we're able to pick up the win. So I mean, at the end of the day, 2 points is 2 points, but it does still kind of seem like there's that issue of maybe playing down to their competition or just not really being able to get going until they find themselves down a goal or two. And I mean, when they have been up some of those goals, I'm sure we'll get into, but we've seen how that goes as well. So there are still some concerns.
Yeah, they don't seem to have much of an urgency in their game until kind of they have to, and then they have these dominant stretches of 10 or 12 minutes in like the second or the third. Something goes wrong, then it kind of goes sour on them. But yeah, like it is good that they won this game without having to go to overtime or a shootout, that they were able to put the Flyers away. An empty netter for McDavid there kind of sealed the deal on all of that. But it is troubling though. I mean, yes, they're getting points, and yes, they're if you were to say, hey, I think it was Mark Spector said on Oilers Now today, he's like, if you were to imagine the Oilers getting points in 15 of their last 16 games, you would take that. You would absolutely be like, I'm not complaining about that. But there are reasons to kind of be like a little nervous here because they're not necessarily playing up to the level that they should be playing. If they play like this in the playoffs, that's going to be concerning for me. Like, I think doing this is a disaster. Like, this is the kind of gameplay that, yes, you're getting points, but you could be ousted in the first round if you play this way. Like that. Yeah. That's what I'm kind of concerned by. How concerning is the injury situation for you? Like, we're hearing Evander Kane is going to be out for a little bit. There's, Draisaitl seems to be like he's playing well, in a matter of speaking, but he sounds like something's bugging him. I'm not really sure if you see that too, but Evander Kane going down, now we're here in a couple of weeks probably. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, so obviously that's a tough loss. He was still kind of trying to get back into the flow of things. Obviously had some big moments, got in that fight, was providing the physicality they needed. Hadn't really gotten all that hot with his goal scoring yet. Obviously had the long time off, so that was kind of expected, but it's a big loss. Obviously we kind of seen when he was missing from the lineup for that long stretch. They were quite average at times, didn't really seem to have a lot going. I think they missed just his leadership, his presence in the lineup. So I think, again, kind of being without him for a few weeks could be a bit of an issue. And then with Draisaitl, like you said, he's putting up his points, but he just really hasn't looked himself. There's been kind of games where it just almost appears to be disinterested. And I know that's not the case, but it's frustrating to watch. And I think there is something that is bugging him. You've seen he's kind of missed a few practices here and there with whatever it is. So I think he is a little more banged up, maybe even than people are realizing. But yeah, his play definitely hasn't been as dominant as we've grown accustomed to.
Yeah, it's hard to rag on him too much. I mean, he's scoring on the power play. Yeah. He did a couple nice back check plays there in Philadelphia where it was like, okay, you don't normally see that out of Draisaitl, and he did kind of come back and break up a few plays there. So that was really good. What about Dylan Holloway? Do you think this is an issue? Like they've demoted him simply because they have not put Jesse Puljujarvi on waivers. There's been no trade. We're sort of expecting the next shoe to drop here when it comes to Puljujarvi or someone from this roster, whether it's a Warren Fogle or Derek Ryan or somebody, right? Because the Oilers need to sort of clear cap space here. Now, we're not really sure what's happening with Evander Kane. We don't assume this is going to be long enough that this is going to have an LTIR factor. There is some speculation that maybe this isn't great, but it's Dylan Holloway who goes down and is demoted so that they don't have to do this. And then he gets injured in Bakersfield. Do you think this is a big deal? Like, it's not great that Holloway's injured, but do you think he was going to be part of this roster and an important piece in the playoff puzzle moving forward here?
I don't think so, just because I think when he would be most effective, it would be kind of elevated up in the lineup. I think Woodcroft would feel maybe more comfortable with one of those other guys in Bakersfield if they did need to call them up, like say a Malone or a player like that can kind of play that fourth line role a bit better, is maybe a bit more experienced at the NHL level. Not that Malone has a ton more, but just that extra kind of, he's older and everything, kind of knows how it works and is better on the kill kind of fourth line role. So I don't think we probably would have seen Holloway again this season unless there was maybe an injury to a guy in that kind of top 6, top 9. But I don't really see him coming back up again this season, even once he does get healthy now.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there could have been a call here if Klim Kostin was continually out. Like, sounds like he's traveled with the team to Pittsburgh, that he's probably going to play. But he's sort of been, now, I don't know. Do you know, has it been flu related? Has it been injury related? Like, is it, he went into the boards really awkwardly. It looked like a shoulder injury, but they didn't stay out very long. And then we're hearing maybe like a wrist thing, but the flu bug went through the Oilers organization too. So do we know exactly what's going on with Kostin? Like, is he still banged up? Is he injured? Is he just not feeling good? Because he did make the trip with the team to Pittsburgh here. Yeah,
it's kind of same thing as you're here, and it kind of, you've heard a bunch of different things. I know it was kind of the flu, and Desharnais had it too, and a few other guys, like you'd mentioned, Skinner. And so hopefully that's all it is. Obviously his offense hadn't been up as much as when they first kind of picked him up, but he was still just providing big impacts each and every game. Just his size, again, kind of like I was saying about Kane, just the presence he brings. Like, he doesn't let the skilled guys get pushed around and other teams know when he's on the ice. So obviously you're hoping that it's just flu related, because you don't want him to miss any extended time.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like we were just finished talking about how the Oilers were more physical. They were getting in your face. And really the guys that we're talking about here, Evander Kane, Vincent Desharnais, Klim Kostin. And these are the three that have been missing for a little bit. Desharnais' back. He's on emergency recall, so that's good. But, like, that's not what you need. If you're looking at the Oilers situation and you're finally saying, oh, maybe we don't need to go out and add that physical presence at the trade deadline, and then the three guys that you sort of have that can do that stuff are out of your lineup, not ideal. Do you think they're good with what they've got, or do you think they'll go hunting for this? Like, out of any concern that maybe there is something wrong with Evander Kane, that maybe Klim Kostin's going to have something kind of nags him for a little bit. Do you think they'll search for that, or do you think they're good?
Yeah, see, I think they're okay. Like, I can kind of get the argument, especially if Kane or Kostin, it's something worse than kind of what we've heard. But I think that when you kind of have a team that's built one way, you should try and stick that way. And that's why I think, even as far as getting a defenseman instead of grabbing that guy that goes off the glass and out, it kind of makes more sense to add that. I mean, I still don't really see how Karlsson works from a money perspective, but a guy kind of like that can move the puck up to the forwards. I think if you're going to go one way, you might as well continue. So instead of kind of the heavy and hard play that gets away from their top end skill, I think just try and support that and continue on with that.
Okay, well, let's switch gears. Let's talk about that sort of stuff. You mentioned Karlsson's name. Let's start there. Hearing that, I think it was Elliot Friedman said in the 32 Thoughts column today or yesterday, 1 in a million. That's what he's saying when it comes to Erik Karlsson, that these talks are still happening. Chris Johnson is saying that they've continued to have these conversations. Sounds like Erik Karlsson's actually willing to come to Edmonton, that I don't know if it's official or not, but there's now more than one report saying that, yeah, he's open to this and that he wouldn't hold back and he would waive his no trade or no move to come to the Oilers. But there's still this huge hurdle that is his $11.5 million cap hit, even if they retain. And that, I guess, is the hang up here. mixed reports on this, right? Pierre LeBrun is saying that there is no kind of ceiling here for San Jose, that they would be willing to retain as much as 40%, but you would have to really sweeten the pot for that. And then there's other reports. I think Johnson was like, yeah, they're still not past 20% of all of this. So to me, if it's Erik Karlsson and you're only willing to retain 20%, this isn't happening. Like, they just don't know how you make this work. And even at a $9 million cap, I just don't know how the Oilers do it. Like, yes, I guess technically you could move Barry, Fogle, Puljujarvi, Bouchard, your first this year and first, but geez, Louise, like, really? For a $9 million Erik Karlsson, I don't know that I would do that. Like, there is a value here for Erik Karlsson where I'm like, that's a sweet spot. Like, I like it. 9 million, maybe not. You know what I mean? Like, yes, he's having a fantastic season and maybe he'll have another good one next year, but this is still a guy who didn't play so well coming into this year, had injury situations. Like, it's a tough one. Are you kind of hoping that this 1 in a million pans out and then this isn't something that goes down?
I mean, I think it would be cool if he came, obviously. Like, he's having just a huge resurgent year, and if he's healthy, he's obviously proven that he still can be the best defenseman, or at least best offensive defenseman in the NHL. But like you said, like the 2 or 3 seasons prior, like, he struggled. And I think obviously it was health related, but like, you were looking at a guy that in October even was talked about that his contract was like untradeable and one of the worst in the entire NHL. And now you're seeing like, yeah, the Sharks will retain some, but the Oilers still have to give up this, and that. Like, there's so many pieces they have to move all of a sudden. So it's a huge risk. And I just think with the amount of term he still has left and everything, and obviously he's struggled with injuries in the past. So who's to say when one will come up again, and that could again hamper however many years going forward. And he's not very young anymore. I think he's 32 years old. So I just think there's better options out there. Obviously, again, if they were to trade for him, it would be impossible not to be excited. Just his name and what you've seen he's capable of. But that's kind of one that I think they should steer clear of.
What do you make of the whole conversation that the salary retention, that San Jose is like, no, we're not doing more than 20% here? And then there's the argument that's like, the Oilers would be doing San Jose a favor here. You know what I mean? Like, yes, if you were to retain 40% of this, that you're hanging on to whatever that is, $4.5 million over the next 4 years. So it's a lot of money. It's like $20 million bucks that the San Jose, but you're also letting San Jose out of a huge amount of money that they would have to pay Erik Karlsson to keep him on the roster in a time that San Jose is not going to be very good, and that you don't need Erik Karlsson. Like, why do you have a guy with that kind of salary on your roster when you're going to stink up the joint here for the next like 3 or 4 seasons? Where do you lie on this? Like, what's the argument for you? Like, do you believe that if the Oilers were able to make this deal and get Karlsson, because like you said, a couple years ago, nobody really wanted this guy because of his money. Now, all of a sudden, the San Jose is going to get a first, a couple prospects, and a player or two that they can find pretty useful. That's a pretty decent haul for a guy that you couldn't trade 2 years ago. And you get out from under this contract. I mean, if it turns out that Karlsson's production goes way down, San Jose is going to look like geniuses for getting away from this thing. But you also going to be like, yeah, well, we don't want to give this guy away. He's going to have 110 points this season. So which side of this do you lie on?
Honestly, it's not a very fun answer, but I kind of see it from both ends. Like, as far as San Jose, especially, I don't think you want to just get rid of him just for the sake of it, especially if you're going to keep all that money. Like, but then on the other side, it's like you said, they're not going to be very good for quite a while. This is obviously the Connor Bedard year. Like, if anything, he's kind of the reason they're not leading the charge for that. Like, if he's not on that team, I can't imagine that they're anywhere but dead last in the league. So I understand why Greer's kind of hesitant to just move him, especially if he is taking 40% back. That's a huge chunk of salary. But at the same time, they are kind of just in the early stages of a rebuild. And I think they're able to, if they did retain 40% and get everything back that you're hearing, that's a good jumpstart to that rebuild. And that money, while unfortunate, it's not really going to matter for the next, say, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, because they're not going to be competitive in that time, barring if they were to get Bedard and somehow they just turn things around very quickly. But I think the chances of that are slim. So I personally think if they were able to get out of it and give up or get that first, a good prospect, whatever the asking price is in return, I think it makes tons of sense for him to do.
Yeah, I don't know how much I read into like the Zaitsev trade that happened today, where between Ottawa and Chicago, where they're talking about the retention of the salary and how they're comparing, the 4th and the 6th round pick, and they're all this. It's like, if that's what it's costing Chicago, then that's what they're getting here for this retention. I don't know that I buy that, because there's no other player like Erik Karlsson who's got this long of a contract and this long of a term. And you can't really tell what the mental state is of the team that's trading him versus the team that wants to acquire him. If the ownership group of the team that's trying to trade this contract, like, are they willing to hang on to this? Are they saying, you know what, no way, we're not taking that kind of money. We're not going to eat $20 million on a player we don't have. It really, there's no way to know. Like, it's just really hard to make comparisons in that regard. I'm not really sure, but let's switch gears talking about mental states of certain players and what they're doing. Let's go to Patrick Kane here, because there's a lot going on when it comes to Patrick Kane here. He has 5 goals in the last 3 games, has 1 in overtime, or that didn't quite count. He really, really good last few games. It's almost like he's trying to prove a point to the teams that have passed over on him, including the Rangers, who it sounded like he wanted to go to. We have no idea if the Oilers are intriguing to him. We hear that they might be, but sounds like he wants to. I think it was LeBron said, he's going to present one team to the Chicago Blackhawks and say, okay, this is the team that I want to go to, try to make it work. If that doesn't work, will they come back and say, okay, here's another team? We don't know yet. But do you think the Oilers are going to be that team? Like, let's just put it out there. Are the Oilers going to be that team for Patrick Kane?
No. And there's a few different reasons. But first, I have a few different things about this. And first, there's kind of I feel like Chicago's really kind of overplayed their hand here, almost being a bit too patient to kind of shot themselves in the foot. Like, it seems like now everything you're seeing is the teams are a bit hesitant on Kane, given maybe this so-called injury that he might be battling, and just maybe even a bit of a decline, which I personally think is just more team related than anything. But as far as going to Edmonton, I don't see it making a ton of sense. I don't see it being the number 1 team he wants to go to, for the reason that, first, until they get a defenseman, I'm not sure he looks at them and sees them as a cup-winning team. But second, he's not going to play, I can't imagine, on their top power play unit there. I just think there's so much in sync in Edmonton already on that unit that I don't see where he slots in. I don't see who you take out. So that's a big part of it. I think a team that you're kind of hearing that makes more sense of a fit would maybe be Dallas, who's struggling a bit to score, and he'd be in a top 6 role there, get on that top power play. So I don't think Edmonton makes a ton of sense, but I do think it seems like there's this kind of trend lately where all these, just a bunch of people, you're seeing a bunch of things to kind of steer clear of him or something, where I think a lot of people are forgetting this is a guy that just last season had 92 points on a still really weak Chicago team. So it's not like he's a bad player by any means. I think once he gets traded, he can prove that he is one of the better offensive forwards in the league once again, but I don't see Edmonton as the fit.
For me, I think it's probably Vegas. I see this as the team that they moved that Shea Weber contract today, and they're clearing space to make sure that they have, they put Mark Stone on LTIR. Vegas seems like a team to me. Let's say that this injury thing is legitimate, and that there is real concern that Patrick Kane might not be able to make it through the playoffs. I don't know what Mark Stone's status is, but I have this thing that I'm believing he might be back for the playoffs at some point. And if that's the case, maybe Vegas doesn't care. Maybe Vegas is just kind of like, you know what, if we're going to be the one team that takes a flyer on this guy and it doesn't turn out that he's perfectly healthy, well, we got a pretty good team and we got a really good player coming back in the playoffs. We've got Patrick Kane all the way up until the playoff run. Let's see what we can do here. Like, that seems to be, and they got all sorts of cap space now to make this deal. He's a rental. He's probably not going to be signing there. There's a lot of reasons that I think Vegas is going to be a heavy player on this one. And to me, the one team that would be like, you don't want a Patrick Kane who isn't healthy, but if you're going to take a chance, maybe it's the Vegas Golden Knights who are willing to take that gamble.
For sure.
I mean, it's Vegas, right?
Vegas,
yeah. So you never really know. What are you hearing? There's a couple of reports here when it comes to some other players too. Sam Lafferty, apparently the Oilers made a pitch for him, but the ask from Chicago was way too high. So Edmonton's like, yeah, no, we'll wait on this one. Do you think that he's a fit here, or they just move on if that ask is really high?
I think even if the ask is kind of what you're hearing or even relatively high, I don't see it as much of an upgrade. I think that's something where you're just kind of bringing in depth, and obviously, again, a guy that can help on the kills, having a bit of a better year offensively than what he's done in the past. But I think that is a move to me. If they make it, it's basically Holland saying that there was nothing else they are able to do and just kind of making it look like they're doing something to try and put some energy into the group. But I don't really see where he slots in. And it wouldn't be too exciting of a pickup in my opinion.
Yeah. It sounds like Gavrikov, who you've been a huge fan of, looks like he might be going to Boston. The Bruins apparently are just trying to move a contract to make that one work, but it's pretty close from what we understand. So he might be off the Oilers' radar if he was ever really on it for real. The backup that we both were saying we were hearing about is Colton Parayko out of St. Louis. What do you think? What's your first reaction to this one? Like, here's maybe a player. We talk about Karlsson's contract. The Parayko contract might be scarier. Like, yeah, it's like just over half of what Karlsson is, $6.5 million. But I was just looking at it. It's like he's got a deal in place until like 2029. Like, it's a huge, and it's $6.5 million. Like, that's a lot of money. And I don't know that. I mean, I would have assumed he'd probably be willing to come to Edmonton. He's a local kid, and he's from the area and stuff, and maybe that'd be something he'd be open to. But I don't know that I would want to go there. Like, this is a guy whose production has declined. He's got some issues, injury related, that maybe it's not. It's a long contract. Like, it is really, and I don't imagine St. Louis is going to retain a ton on this. Maybe if they retain a bunch, then you consider it. But that's a really long contract. Would you touch this if you couldn't get Erik Karlsson? And you didn't know, like, if Gavrikov goes to Boston and Jake McCabe out of Chicago, it sounds like he's declined any Canadian teams that might not be Toronto. So it doesn't look like Edmonton's on his radar. If Parayko's your guy and he's your backup and he's the one person, would you do it? I don't know that I would.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. It's just because of that term alone. I don't even think that the cap is horrible. If it was maybe a year, 2 years, even 3 maybe, but with that much term, there's just so much risk that goes into that deal. And I mean, this is a guy that if he does get moved somewhere, he could end up being really good. Like, just a few years ago when he kind of first came into the league, he was really highly thought of, to the point that he was kind of one of the reasons that the Blues were comfortable letting Pietrangelo walk. And then he just really hasn't progressed since then. Like you said, there's been some injuries, and just I don't think he kind of took the next step like everyone was expecting. And not that he's a bad player, but I think at that term and that cap, there's, again, kind of better options. I am still continuing to beat the drum on Jakob Chychrun, but I think, I think there's better options out there than Parayko for sure.
Yeah, well, my question, you got to wonder in St. Louis if he was the kind of player that needed the Pietrangelos or the Jay Bouwmeesters or those people to play with him to make and bring the best out of him, which the Oilers don't really have. Like, the Oilers got some decent pieces, and they're projecting, like, Broberg projects to be pretty good. Evan Bouchard, if he can figure out some of his defensive gaffes, he could be pretty good. Darnell Nurse is pretty steady for all the crap that he gets. Tyson Berry's played really well, but there's nobody on this team that is just sort of that standout. Like, there's no Pietrangelo.
Yeah, exactly. Not even close, in my opinion.
So I don't know if Parayko's ever going to be that guy if you don't have the partner for him that can bring that out of him. I don't know. I don't know his game well enough. I don't know. I haven't watched St. Louis close enough, but yeah, you're right. 2029-30 at $6.5 million per season. Like, that's a long contract. Yeah. What do you, we talked about Chychrun. What do you think is happening here? Like, is this, we've heard the Kings, but then we've heard the Kings have backed off of this. We've heard, even St. Louis is in this now because of the fact that they traded Noel Acciari and Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko, and they got all these picks, and maybe they want to flip this thing over really quick and could go after Meyer and Chychrun. Do you have a feeling as to where he's going to go? I know you'd like him to come to Edmonton, but do you think that's what happens?
I feel like we're going to be here in 2 years from now talking about where he's going to go. Like, he's been on the trading block for so long now. It's crazy. Like, obviously teams just aren't comfortable. They obviously think the Coyotes asking price is too high. And I mean, from the Coyotes perspective, I guess it's, well, like, they don't have to trade him. He's got term, but at the same time, it's a weird situation now because they haven't played him for quite a while. And so if they don't, like, do they just put him back in the lineup? Like, it's
he practiced today too.
Yeah. It's a weird situation. So I have to imagine he gets moved. I don't think it's Edmonton. Again, you're just not hearing a ton about it right now. Like you said, it sounded like the Kings had a deal and then that fell through. You've kind of heard the Bruins a bit earlier in the season, so maybe they try to revisit it. But there's been talks that the Coyotes are willing to retain almost like half of his contract too. So potentially,
I think
the guy
for sure do it if they got their assets returned. I have to wonder though if the fact that they put him on the ice for practice is them trying to show the rest of the league any rumors about him being injured aren't true. Like, because if that's the case and there was an injury that people thought maybe the Coyotes were not really talking about, I could see why teams backed off, because there was already concern here that Chychrun wasn't 100% healthy. And if that's the case, and then all of a sudden he's got something that's kind of kicked up again, and that's maybe why they're pulling him, but they're saying it's for trade-related reasons, and there's question marks about his health, I could understand why teams would be like, whoa, okay, maybe not. Like, this is something we were interested in, but now not if he's not totally healthy. We're not. And so you put him back on the ice, you make it sound like he's practicing, like maybe you're going to pop him back in the lineup again. And then maybe these teams that were a little concerned will be like, well, okay, well, he's practicing. He's probably all right. I have to wonder if some of that's going on here. I don't imagine the Oilers do this. Like, I just don't. Here's my question. The Oilers going to be, for fans that really want a big swing here, because we're talking like everybody keeps saying Oilers are looking to swing big here. Does it happen? I don't know. Does it? Like, are we going to be disappointed with whatever does go down here? Like, we got to assume something's going to happen, but is it going to be anywhere near the names that are connected to this team?
Well, like as far as like the Chychrun one goes, I feel like if that were to have happened, it would have happened already, probably a few months back. So I really don't think so. I think they're just in such a tough spot cap wise, and I'm not like a Ken Holland hater by any means, but he hasn't shown me enough since he's been in Edmonton that he's as creative as maybe like the Kyle Dubises and GMs like that to kind of work around these cap issues. Like we just see him with that Ryan O'Reilly trade. So I'm really not holding my breath. Again, I would love to see something, but I wouldn't be surprised if, in all honesty, it's kind of, he picks up a guy that's maybe off the radar, maybe one you haven't even heard about at all. Cause it seems like so many reports you're hearing is, one day the Oilers are getting this guy, then they're getting a completely different one. And then you kind of heard from, I think it was Stauffer like a week ago that says maybe not to expect much. So I think everyone's kind of confused on what's going on. And I think Holland's trying to do something, but I don't have a lot of confidence that there's going to be like a really big player coming to Edmonton.
Yeah, I don't know if, like, I'm with you. I wonder if anything's really going to happen here major. I think there'll be a trade of some kind, but and we'll all be like, oh, really? That was it? But yeah. I don't necessarily blame Holland for his inability to be creative at this. If you're going to blame Holland, you got to blame what he did leading into this season, because he did come in here and say, look, I tried to make this team as good as I could make it in the summer, and this is the team that I thought was going to get us there. So like, he added Janmark when he didn't necessarily need to add Janmark, and he gave Nurse the big contract and stuff. So if you're going to blame Holland for that, I guess you could blame him for that. But what can you do? Like, Dubas is creative, and so are the Maple Leafs, but they had more cap space than Edmonton did, right? They had the luxury of a guy like Jake Muzzin potentially going on LTIR, which he did right away. So it's kind of like the Oilers don't have that going on, and so it's kind of tight. Now, if Kane, if something happens here and he goes on LTIR, well, then all of a sudden Holland's going to be like, woohoo, even though he's not very happy that Evander Kane's going to be out, because he will be back for the playoffs, right? And he can make the moves that he wants to make. I don't think that's happening. I don't think the Kane injury is that serious, but I guess we'll find out here over the next couple of weeks. Okay, so to close things off, let's talk about the next game up. Pittsburgh Penguins, Oilers, looking to get more points here. Pittsburgh, I don't know what the record is in the last little bit, but it sounds like certain players are doing well, but the organization's a little iffy. What do you think is happening here with this team? What's the score going to be?
Yeah, so honestly, like I said, just with the Oilers' play as of late, I'm not overly confident in them, but they're playing a team in Pittsburgh that's really struggling lately, falling out of the playoff picture. So I will take the Oilers. It seems like McDavid kind of thrives against going up against Crosby. So I'll say 4-2 Oilers win. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to say the Oilers keep getting points here. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it goes to overtime again, but the Oilers actually win it this time.
There you go.
So like, cause it's too weird for me to see the Oilers continually go. Like, a shootout's another thing, because everybody's got at least 2 or 3 guys on a team that are really good at shootouts. So I don't think the Oilers have much of an advantage in that respect, but 3-on-3, the Oilers should be good. Like, they should be better than they
always were. It's just this season. It's like something. Yeah.
And it's a surprise to me that they have not been able to strike. I don't know. I'm not blaming Nurse on this one, but the combination of Draisaitl, McDavid, and Nurse to start off the overtime doesn't work for me. I don't like it. And they didn't do that last year, I don't think. I think it was Barry or whomever that was starting the overtime with it, which I thought was a much better combination. But they got to figure this out. It wasn't that long ago they weren't going to overtime at all. And then all of a sudden they went to it a bunch and they stunk at it. And they shouldn't be that bad. They're like one of the most skilled teams in the league. So 3-on-3, you'd think they'd be pretty good. So I'm going to say they go to overtime. I'll call it 2-2. Oilers win in overtime 3-2. The odds of me being wrong here are really high, but I'm gonna say that anyway, just because that's what I want to see. I want to see the Oilers get one, and a team against in the East can afford to give them a point. If it was a Western team, I wouldn't say that, because I don't want them in the Pacific Division getting free points. But you never know. All right, Colton, thanks, buddy. We'll drop her there and let everybody else go to the hockeywriters.com to check out all the news and rumors articles that everybody's writing about the teams. Especially as the trade deadline gets closer. I think as we record this, we got 9 days. When people hear this, it's going to be 8. So it's right around the corner, just over a week. Check out all the other videos on the YouTube channel and everything else that comes with the Hockey Writers. Colton, thanks, buddy. We'll talk to everybody else in the next one.